Hey everyone. Something I'm really passionate about is finding new destinations to fly fish that aren't overpriced or overcrowded. So our new mission here at the Fly Rod Fanatic channel, in addition to our how-to videos, is going to be exploration. It's about finding those off-the-radar spots, the places you'd not thought to fish yourself, the places you thought were out of your reach, or the places that were just a little too difficult to plan for yourself. If any of that sounds interesting to you, please subscribe to this channel because the adventures, well, they're just beginning. So I invite you to come along as we find new places to fish. In this video, we're traveling to the beautiful country of Croatia for some sightseeing, taking in the culture, but most importantly, some amazing fly fishing. Roll the intro. Welcome to what is not your typical fly fishing video, but more of a travelogue of our experience in Croatia. You see, my love of fly fishing is really born out of a deep love of the natural world. The sights and the sounds and the smells of certain places you've been sometimes stay with you forever. Croatia, for me, is one of those places. It's been said that trout don't live in ugly places, and I'll add grayling to that list, along with a few others. So when you cross an ocean for any reason, not only are you going for the scenery, but if you're like me, you want to learn about the history. You want to sample the food, experience the culture. So here's what we'll cover in this video. I am so excited to share this with you. So in this video, what we're going to do is I'd like to briefly discuss how we ended up choosing to go to Croatia as a fly fishing destination. We'll also talk about a few things that might help you decide on whether or not Croatia might be a place you'd like to visit. And we'll talk about the best time of year to visit, be it for fishing, for general summertime activities, or if you want to visit at the perfect time to do both. We'll discuss our own itinerary that we followed when we were in Croatia. There could be some good information in there for you when you're trying to decide which things you want to do, which cities you want to hit. We're, of course, going to talk about the fly fishing. It was some of the most memorable fly fishing I've ever experienced. And there's some good nuggets of information in there for you. Also, we're going to discuss some tips for Croatia travel. If you're not an experienced world traveler or you're just not experienced with Croatia, there's a few good bits of information that I'd like to impart to you. Now, in this list, if there's anything that you're just not really interested in, I'll try to put chapter markers below so you can fast forward to what you're interested in. So, what made us decide to visit Croatia? Well, my wife and I both love to travel. And in the summer of 2022, my wife and I were ready to travel again. It had been a while since either of us had been out of the country because of the pandemic. That summer, my wife and I got sick. And this messed up any plans for fly fishing or traveling that summer. So with nothing to do but rest and get better, we started researching. Well, my wife returned from work one day. She's a flight attendant. And told me she'd met a coworker that grew up in Slovenia, right next door to Croatia. They were talking about travel, and he suggested we look at Croatia as it was one of his favorite places and it was remarkably affordable. So what did I do? I immediately Googled, can I fly fish in Croatia? Sure enough, there's trout, grayling, huchin, which is a fish in the salmon family. When I saw pictures of the rivers in Croatia, I was hooked, and I became obsessed with the idea of fly fishing there. My wife's sister, Julie, was engaged to be married, and when she heard what we were up to, she thought, hey, Croatia's beautiful, and that'd be a great place to elope to. So we invited her and her future husband, Nate. And before you knew it, we had flights and AirBNBs booked. They were excited to be planning a vacation and a wedding, and I was excited right along with them. But I was dreaming of the fly fishing. So, should you consider Croatia? Like many Americans, our interest in Croatia was piqued because of some beautiful scenery seen in movies and television. As a Gen Xer myself, the land east of the Adriatic Sea was known to me as Yugoslavia. However, Croatia declared independence from Yugoslavia way back in 1991. Now, I'm not qualified to talk much about the history of this era of Europe beyond that because it's actually pretty confusing to me. But I will say with all authority, it is one of the most beautiful places in Europe you can possibly experience. The people are friendly and accommodating, and the 8 national parks in this country contain so much natural beauty. There are over 1,200 islands, and only 50 or so are inhabited. There's also 10 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Croatia, 10 of them. If you're a foodie, hey, let's talk about the food. On the mainland, Croatian food is heavily influenced by Slavic, Turkish, and Hungarian dishes. In the coastal regions, there are influences from Greek and Roman tradition, as well as the cuisine of the Mediterranean. Because Croatian cuisine is so diverse, it's been called the cuisine of regions. So, what time of year is best? Well, if you're interested in swimming and beach activities, the best time to visit Croatia is really any time between June and September when the weather is warm and sunny and the sea temperature is comfortable for swimming. If you prefer to avoid the crowds and don't mind cooler weather, you could visit as early as May or as late as October. During these months, the weather is still pleasant and you can enjoy the beauty of the country without the summer crowds. If you're interested in sightseeing, exploring the cities, and cultural activities, the best time to visit during the shoulder seasons of April, May, September, and October. During these months, the weather is mild and you can enjoy the country's attractions without the summer crowds. Keep in mind that the peak tourist season in Croatia is in July and August, and the prices of accommodation and transportation can be higher during this period. For us, we decided to visit in the late September, early October timeframe, as the fishing was still open, but the busy summer travel season had passed. If you're interested in going in spring, the fishing seasons usually start in April or May, depending on the river, but they'll usually end about October 15th. Getting there. Well, my wife and I flew from Phoenix to JFK Airport in New York and secured a hotel room for the night. Our travel companions, her sister and fiance, would take a red-eye from Salt Lake City, crash for a few hours with us, and we'd make our way back to JFK for our flight to Rome. Now, this is where I should tell you we were not originally supposed to go to Rome, but Amsterdam. Dutch KLM canceled our flight to Split, Croatia, just days before our trip was to begin. This is where being flexible and creative is really important when you travel internationally. I'll explain how we dealt with the sudden change of plans later in the video. Our first night in Croatia would be spent in Kastel Stari. It's a small town located in the Split Dalmatia county of Croatia along the Adriatic coast. It's one of 7 Castella towns which are situated between the cities of Split and Trogir. Kastel or Kastela means castle. Kastel Stari has a rich history dating back to ancient times. The town was originally founded by the ancient Greeks, who called it Kastelos. Later on, the Romans built a military camp in the area. The town was also occupied by the Venetians, the Austrians, and the French during various periods of history. The town is known for its beautiful beaches, which are popular with tourists during the summer months. In addition, there are many restaurants and cafes in the area that serve traditional Croatian cuisine. Now, Kastel Stari isn't going to be found on many people's must-see list, but let me tell you why we loved it. We found ourselves staying there by accident. One of our party booked an AirBNB while looking for places to stay in Split. She didn't realize it was actually located north of Split. We thought about rebooking closer to Split, but when we looked again and saw that Kastel Stari was actually located between the airport and Split, and we preferred staying in small towns instead of cities. So that's where we ended up staying, and we were so glad we did. Sea Castle Gajo. Well, that's an Airbnb that we found. What made staying in Kastel Stari so special for us was the most incredible Airbnb experience we've ever had. The place is called Sea Castle Apartment Gajo, and our hosts were Antonella and Shrechko. What none of us knew was that my wife had been in contact with our host Antonella to let her know that we had a wedding party with us and requested a welcome gift upon arrival and offered to pay for any expenses. Antonella said, "How exciting! Not to worry." Well, our flights got delayed and we ended up not getting in until well past nightfall, and our driver had a hard time finding the place. We ended up thanking him and going on foot, dragging our luggage down dark alleys, trying to find our apartment. We knew it was on the waterfront, so we headed in that direction. Suddenly, we heard a friendly voice out of the dark. It was Shrechko. He'd come looking for us. He helped us with our luggage into the most beautiful apartment, and Antonella had laid out an amazing charcuterie board and had wine and champagne waiting for us. We'd never felt so welcomed or cared for after a long trip. Meeting people like Antonella and Shrechko is one of my favorite things about traveling. You never know when you're going to make a new lifelong friend. I'll put a link down below to all of the places we stayed in Croatia, but if you're visiting Split, you'll find no better hosts than Antonella and Shrechko. The next morning, we were up to visit Diocletian's palace, an ancient palace built for the Roman Emperor Diocletian at the turn of the 4th century AD, which today forms about half of the old town of Split, Croatia. Our Uber driver, like all the drivers we had in Croatia, was happy to give us a history lesson and point out interesting things to do. He even jumped out of the car and gave us directions using a scale model of the palace when he dropped us off. We had a great time visiting the palace complex, shopping and eating and taking pictures. It's so amazing to see something so old, so rich in history. You can't help but be filled with awe as you're walking the same streets and passageways that ancient peoples have also walked. While visiting Diocletian's palace, we toured the Cathedral of St. Domnius. The Cathedral of St. Domnius, consecrated at the turn of the 7th century AD, is regarded as the oldest Catholic cathedral in the world that remains in use in its original structure, without near complete renovation at a later date, though the bell tower dates from the 12th century. It was originally built as a mausoleum for the Roman Emperor Diocletian, who was a great persecutor of Christians, but was later converted into a Christian church and dedicated to St. Domnius. The cathedral is a symbol of Croatian national identity and pride, and is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next day, we had a tour of Krka National Park. We grabbed another Uber from Kastel Stari into the bus station in Split, where our tour bus was waiting. We're not usually tour bus people, but since the park is a ways away from Split, we decided to let someone else do the driving and plan our activities. The tour did not disappoint. Krka National Park is named after the Krka River. The park was established in 1985 and covers an area of 109 square kilometers. The park is known for its numerous waterfalls and lakes. This is a must-see destination for anyone visiting Croatia. With its beautiful waterfalls, stunning lakes, and rich cultural heritage, it offers something for everyone. After leaving Krka National Park, our tour operator took us by bus to the village of Primosten, where we could explore the beach town and grab some lunch. Well, we had a delicious lunch and even learned about a red wine called Babic. Many families in Croatia make their own wine from recipes passed down through the generations. Babic is a red wine grape variety that is primarily grown in Croatia, particularly in the area around town of Šebenik. Our tour guide knew the owners of the restaurant where we ate. They actually let us purchase a bottle of their family's personal stash of babić to take with us. Just another example of the kindness shown to us in Croatia. When we finally returned to Kastel Stari in the evening, there was all this activity around the little town. They were preparing some sort of festival. People were excitedly setting up tents and preparing huge pots of food. Turns out there was a seafood cooking contest going on, as well as a squid fishing contest where kids were hand lining for squid right from the docks. It was a charity event of some sort, but since I couldn't read the signs, I just called it the Squid Fest. That night, our host Antonella and Shrechko took us to the festival and introduced us as their guests from America. We ate some delicious food and listened to live music. Afterwards, Shrechko and Antonella invited us to the coffee shop below our apartment, where we talked into the night and shared some wine and exchanged some gifts with our new friends. That night, I never wanted to leave Croatia. The whole day had just been magical. The next morning, we sadly said goodbye to our hosts and new friends. It was time to head to the island of Hvar for more adventures and a wedding. We needed to get to the port of Split to take a ferry to our next AirBNB. But first, we'd make a stop at the fortress of Klis for a little sightseeing. We called our Uber driver from the day before, and he told us he could take us up to the fortress and then down to the port in time for our trip to Hvar. Klis Fortress is a former Croatian royal castle and stronghold. The Klis Fortress stands guard in a highly strategic location above Split. The views from up there are astounding. Afterward, we drove down to the port of Split, and it was time to catch our ferry to the island of Hvar. Now, the ferries in Croatia are very nice. They're a normal part of life for people living on the coast or on the islands. There's typically food and drink available, and the seats are very comfortable. One thing we found interesting is that people's luggage is just stowed everywhere, sometimes blocking emergency exits. This was one of those times when traveling, you just gotta go with the flow and hope for the best. After an hour-long ferry ride, we arrived in Hvar. This is an incredibly beautiful island and a great place to take wedding pictures. We checked our rental apartment out and set out about preparing for the wedding the next day. We'd brought clothes to attend this wedding, and the bride and groom had their clothes, but that was about it. It was to be very informal, like you'd expect when someone elopes. But you should at least have flowers at a wedding, right? The trouble was, flowers were not in season, and there were none to be purchased. So Julie and Tiffany, my wife, they set about walking the neighborhood of our Airbnb and appropriating anything they thought could work for a wedding bouquet and the groom's boutonniere. They'd hired a photographer from the mainland, and we met her at the port. Following them around to different shooting spots was a lot of fun. When the locals and tourists alike saw a woman in a wedding dress, they would often shout out their words of congratulations. It was just a great day. The wedding went off without a hitch, and the next day we were off to the island of Vis, where we'd live on a sailboat for a few days. Several movies have been filmed there due to the stunning scenery. I believe Mamma Mia 2 may have been one of the movies. During the Cold War, the entire island was used as a military base by the Yugoslav army, and it was off limits to foreign visitors. This military presence prevented excessive development and tourism. Now visitors are welcome, but the island's military past is still visible in some of its historic sites and landmarks, such as the military tunnels and bunkers that were built during the Yugoslav era. These tunnels and bunkers are open to visitors and offer a unique glimpse into the island's military history. We even saw an old submarine pen from the Cold War era. The skipper of the boat took us around the island, and we moored in a quiet cove for the night. The skipper took a dinghy home, and we enjoyed the solitude of the cove, swam, and used the paddleboards. When our skipper returned the next day, it was time to explore more of the island from the sea. Originally, we wanted to see the famous Blue Cave on a nearby island called Bishevo. But we were informed it was really crowded and would take too much of the day getting there. So our skipper suggested a place closer by called the Green Cave. This would allow us to satisfy our desire to see caves and also visit Steniva Beach, one of the most picturesque parts of the island. The only way to visit this beach is by boat or by a very arduous long footpath. After seeing these spots, we ended the day back in port, walked to a highly recommended restaurant for a traditional dish called pastasada, which is a slow-cooked beef stew that is typically served with homemade gnocchi or dumplings. It was amazing. Our final morning in Vis found us boarding another ferry back to Split and then by taxi to the airport, where we'd pick up a rental car to drive north to the Istrian Peninsula and our next stay in the city of Pula. Istria is a peninsula located in the northwestern part of Croatia, bordering Slovenia and Italy. If you like truffles, olive oil, wine, medieval architecture, and Roman ruins, you must visit the northern part of Croatia. Our trip north would also get me closer to fly fishing, which I'd been dreaming about for months. Our drive would take 5 hours, and we'd see more stunning scenery, experience the longest highway tunnels we'd ever seen, and eat at the fanciest rest stop any of us had ever experienced. The Croatian highway system is very well maintained, and I'll talk more about driving in Croatia. In Pula, we wanted a more urban experience. We'd booked an Airbnb that literally overlooked a largely intact Roman amphitheater. More intact than the Colosseum in Rome, actually. The Pula Arena was used for gladiatorial contests and other public spectacles during the Roman Empire, and it could seat up to 20,000 spectators. Today, the arena is still used as a venue for concerts and theater performances and other cultural events, and it's one of the most popular tourist attractions in Pula. Here in Pula, we found more amazing food and shopping in between visits to the Roman ruins around town, like the Temple of Augustus. There's also a military museum. The exhibits there cover various topics such as the First and Second World Wars, the Croatian War of Independence, and the history of the Yugoslav Navy. After enjoying our first evening in Pula, it was time for us to split from our travel companions for a few days. Tiffany and I would drive northeast in our rental car to go fly fishing, and Julie and Nate would hang out in Pula to go kayaking and dolphin watching. Finally, the time had come. We were going to go fly fishing. Like everything we'd experienced in Croatia up to this point, it exceeded our expectations. And we'd meet more amazing people we'll remember forever. The drive from Pula to our destination along the Slovenian border would take several hours. We were destined for a little village named Turk in the Gorski Kotar area of northern Croatia. I'd managed to locate a fishing guide and had been emailing him for a few weeks. His name is Zach, and he's the owner and operator of River Kupa Lodge. The drive to the lodge took us along some of the same route we'd taken getting to Pula the day before. But outside the city of Rijeka, we bore northeast towards the capital city of Zagreb on Highway E65. We were heading to the town of Domnius, where we would then take Road 203 towards the Slovenian border and the Kupa River Valley. At the border village of Brod na Kupi, we turned left and followed the river to River Kupa Lodge in Turk. Look at these pools. Some ducks on the water down there. It's just now 4 p.m. local time. When we arrived at the lodge, Zach was waiting for us and was eager to serve us a refreshment and let us relax after our drive. We were finally at a fishing lodge, and I was finally truly in my element. I find it funny how fly fishers, no matter where they call home, seem to share an unspoken language. Their lodges share a common decor. So different, but so similar at the same time. So let's talk about my fascination with grayling. I've been a trout fisherman for most of my life. a fly fisherman for about half of my life. But for the last 5 years, I've been a little obsessed with the idea of catching grayling. In North America, we have Arctic grayling. As you can imagine by the name, they are a fish you typically find in places like Alaska. But in the lower 48 states of America, there are some Arctic grayling too. They were transplanted here. They're just harder to find and usually very small fish. So I'd been on a mission to catch a grayling and hadn't had much luck. I finally caught a small one in the state of Utah in 2020. It was a beautiful fish and I was ecstatic, but I wanted to catch more. So fast forward to when we're planning this trip. During my research, I saw that Croatia had grayling, and they were of the European variety. They get much larger than what I was used to. I knew I had to catch one. Little did I know I'd catch a lot of them. The next day, we awoke to church bells, as we did almost every day while there. Zach fed us a big breakfast and fitted us with boots and waders we'd borrow while we were there. Zach's car was loaded with our gear, and we were heading to the river. We checked a few of his favorite spots, and he decided to take us into the national forest, where he had some special access as a guide. I was in heaven. The water here is so clear. But Zach told us the water wasn't gin clear, as he called it. There had been a bad storm the week prior, and the river was still recovering. Even as it was some of the clearest water I'd ever seen. Zach showed us his favorite technique for nymphing and these clear waters, where the composition of the riverbed and the color of the bedrock make the grayling nearly impossible to see, even in clear water. Before long, we'd caught our first European grayling, and the first of many throughout the day. We had the river to ourselves, which is not uncommon here. After a fantastic morning of fishing, Zach showed us to an absolutely beautiful lunch spot where he'd made us an amazing lunch of sandwiches and liquor. After lunch, we got right back down to fishing, and the action in the afternoon was just as good as the action in the morning. Here's a few pictures of more fish that we caught in the afternoon. There was a lot of action, and my arm was tired at the end of the day. After one of my best days fly fishing ever, it was time for us to return to Pula to spend another evening with our travel companions and then explore more of the Istrian Peninsula. Our first stop would be Motovun, a small medieval town. It's situated on a hilltop overlooking the Mirna River Valley and is surrounded by vineyards and forests. The town has a rich history that dates back to prehistoric times, and it was an important center of trade and culture during the Middle Ages. We'd booked a truffle hunting trip with Tartufi Istria. We were really missing our dogs back home, and Tartufi Istria lets you forage for truffles with trained dogs. After a successful truffle hunt, they welcomed us into their shop, gave us wine and another charcuterie board. Then prepared us more food using the truffles we'd found. We'd like to thank Drazen, Patrick, Christian, and Mariana for their kindness and generosity. It was a 10 out of 10 experience. Now, let me tell you about some fackin' good wine. Fackin, F-A-K-I-N. That's the name of a winery. You see, we'd spent so much time in Motovun, we decided to spend the night. So we found a last minute Airbnb that happened to be on the Facken Winery estate. It was great. After we got settled in, we walked just a few steps down the road to their tasting room, and to our delight, it was open for business. Well, we did more than taste. Our host happily poured us glass after glass of the most delicious wine we'd ever tasted. It's a pity I can't find that Facken wine here in the US. Well, the next morning, we were off to, after a heavily, induced sleep, thanks to some great Facken wine, we were off to see more of Istria. We love touring distilleries. I'm a whiskey collector, and it's just something that we do. Well, there's a distillery in the little town of Buzet called Aura Distillery. It would be our last stop in Istria before heading back to Split for our flights home. We had no appointment or tour booked. We just kind of showed up. They were expecting a large tour bus of visitors, so our host Branka gave us a very quick tour and showed us to a table in the garden where we were given yet another charcuterie board and free cocktails. Once again, the kindness we were shown made this another 10 out of 10 experience. We ended up buying quite a lot of stuff, as it's not something you can readily find where we live. One of the many things they make is a sweet liquor called Terranino. My wife says it tastes like Christmas in a bottle. Cheers to Aura Distillery and our host, Branka. After touring the distillery in Buzet, we drove south and stayed in an Airbnb in Zadar so we could be close to the airport for our flights back the next day. Our travel companions took different flights home, as Tiffany and I wanted to spend one romantic evening in Amsterdam on our way home. That was a disaster, but probably a subject for another video. Which brings me to some travel tips for Croatia, as well as general tips for most countries outside of the US. First of all, let's talk about some mobile applications. There are some mobile apps you can have on your phone that are going to make your life a lot easier. There's some really, really good tools that you may want to have here. Okay. First of all, Google is just a phenomenal resource for a lot of things. Okay, not just search, but Google Translate, and there is a mobile app for that. Okay, and obviously Google Maps as well. Now, the nice thing about, I'll tell you what, before we get into these, let me just bring them all up on the screen. And if you want, you could, take a screenshot of this or something like that. But, we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these applications. Okay. And in addition to mobile apps, we're going to talk a little bit about money, because if you're not accustomed to traveling internationally, money and transportation are really, really big deals, right? To people that are, looking to maybe go someplace for the first time. So we're gonna talk a little bit about money as well. All right. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. First of all, those Google apps. The audio feature of Google Translate is really, really handy. I didn't really use it very much, but I know that a lot of people do. You can literally bring up the app and you can speak into it, and it will translate and give the other person you're trying to communicate with some semblance of something that they can more readily understand. But, in most modern, European countries, you'll find that the younger generations speak flawless English. Okay. This started happening a long time ago. The younger generation started, learning English. It's funny, in a lot of the Asian countries that I've gone to, there's not really there may not be a really formal curriculum for young people to learn English. A lot of them learn English by simply watching American television, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? So, anyways, let's move on. Google Translate, super happy that I had that on my phone. Um, a lot of the reason why I'm talking about some of these applications is because of the fact that you may not have the kind of cellular service that you're accustomed to having in your home country. Okay. Uh, I'm not going to get into all of the ways of managing things like SIMs for your phone and eSIMs, not in this particular video. But rest assured, you may not have the level of service that you're accustomed to when you're traveling across Europe and, things, Croatia specifically, okay? One of the nice things about Google Maps is if you have the mobile application and you click in your little profile to bring up a menu, you will see the ability to download offline map areas. So you can kind of drag and drop of a place that you're going to be, you're going to need some directions there, and you may not have cell service in that location. That's extremely handy, folks. We use that quite a bit. The other thing that is really handy, and a lot of people in the US or North America at large don't really realize that people in other countries do not text the way that we do, okay? They may pay quite a bit for the type of texting that we take for granted here all the time. What's really common is an application called WhatsApp. Okay, so make sure that you download and have WhatsApp configured on your phone before you go out of the country or anywhere where you may not have cell service, such as an airplane, right? You use your same phone number. You give people your same phone number, and as you're traveling around, as you get Wi-Fi, you can see these texts coming in, but they're coming in on WhatsApp. Okay, same phone number, very easy to use, great application, and it's used everywhere outside the U.S. Right? So you need WhatsApp as you're meeting people. As you, for instance, we met a few Uber drivers that were just fantastic. We hit it off immediately, and we wanted to contact them directly outside of the Uber application. They're always happy to give you their WhatsApp, which is their phone number. It's their WhatsApp. What I found interesting is these people use WhatsApp all day, every day, constantly. It's a normal part of their lives. But, WhatsApp has this feature where you can go into your profile and bring up a barcode and just show it to a person, and they can just take a picture of it, right? Just like you scan any barcode with your phone. They looked at me like I was crazy. They don't use it. They don't use that feature for some crazy reason. I had to show people, here's an American showing a European how to use WhatsApp, all the features of WhatsApp. So that I found that kind of interesting. So just, collect phone numbers via WhatsApp, okay, and use WhatsApp. And then as you're, driving, you're on the road, you can literally put your phone in airplane mode, but turn the wireless back on. And then when you go into a rest stop or lobby of a Starbucks or something like that, and you get that Wi-Fi, you can begin texting, and there's really no charge for that, okay? So that's an important tool. WhatsApp, Google Translate, Google Maps. Make sure you have those on your phone before you go. Some additional mobile apps, and I'm just going to throw them all up here because maybe you want to just pause this and take a screenshot or take a picture with your phone. These are mobile apps that we found extremely handy in Croatia. The first one is, and I have a hard time pronouncing this, but Jadrolinia. This is the major ferry system in Croatia. And this is hands down the easiest way, if you're going to be using the ferry system, to purchase your tickets. Okay. There's, we were in a variety of ports, and for the most part, it was easy to find the kiosk to go and buy, ferry tickets. But, sometimes that kiosk is nowhere near where you would expect it to be. Maybe it's across the street in an alley or something like that. So it was really handy to be able to buy the tickets there, and you don't have to worry about any communication issues with the person that you're trying to buy tickets from and stuff like that. So definitely, if you're going to be on the coastal regions visiting any islands, get that particular app, and it's going to show you the ferry schedule, and it's going to allow you to buy tickets right there. The two major car sharing services in Croatia are Uber and Bolt. Now, we never used Bolt, so I can't give you any personal recommendations regarding Bolt. We just use Uber because it's something that we're accustomed to using here. Met some really nice people driving for Uber, and every one of them was a tour guide to us. They were so proud of their country and wanted us to see things, as we were driving into Split, we actually passed ancient Roman aqueducts, and we wouldn't have noticed them if our driver hadn't have passed them, hadn't have pointed them out. So Uber and Bolt, really good car sharing apps. Another app we did not use, but I've heard that a lot of people do, is BlaBlaCar. BlaBlaCar is kind of a different take on ride sharing. It includes private drivers, and carpool situations, and even buses. Okay, this is handy if you want to go from one major city to another and you don't really want to bother renting a car because maybe you don't want to return it to the same place. It's not an option for you. BlaBlaCar is another service. Somebody that is making a long road trip from Pula to Split or Dubrovnik or something like that. It's a good deal for them to go onto this and say, hey, I'm traveling from these cities to these cities. Let's just split expenses. Let's split those toll road fees and stuff like that. Another app that I love and I've used all over the world is Rome to Rio. Rome to Rio is one of my secret weapons when it comes to figuring out how to get from one place to another. I absolutely love it. Rome to Rio will allow you to really find all your options from getting from one city to another. So if you are trying to get from Zagreb to Pula, you can go in there and it'll tell you, is there a flight? Is there a bus? Is there an overnight bus? Is there a train? It's really, really handy. So I absolutely love Rome to Rio, and I can't recommend it enough. I don't have any relationship with any of these people. These are just apps that I like, okay? There are certain cities in Croatia. The one that we had experience with was Pula, downtown Pula. Like any city, parking can be an issue. And when you do find a parking spot, there might be a meter, there might be just a space number and a kiosk where you have to go and put in coins or something of that nature, and then, put a receipt on your dash. And they are very confusing, right? Particularly if you don't have the right denominations, the coins, any of that stuff. So the two major mobile apps for parking fees are bmove and Paydo. I ended up using bmove, and the mistake that I made, you couldn't blame me because I'd never been there. I didn't even know these things existed. I was in Pula, so I'm already in a country other than my home country, and I'm trying to put my credit card into these apps. And several of my credit cards did not subscribe to the standards, the EU standards that these apps needed. They wanted to send me a text to make sure it was me. Only one of my credit cards subscribed to that particular service, and that was my American Airlines MasterCard. So make sure, do yourself a favor, get these apps before you go and get your credit card information all configured and just get all that stuff together. And if you're visiting a large city and you need to pay for parking, this is the way to do it. Now, finding fun things to do. Earlier in the video, you saw that we took a tour bus to Krka National Park. That was amazing. It was so inexpensive, and our tour guide was just delightful. We had such a good time. We found that particular tour via the Get Your Guide mobile app. It's kind of like the other one that I'm listing on the screen here, Viator. It just allows you to find tours, excursions, bus tours, walking tours, museum tours, movie tickets, tickets for harbor cruises, boat rides, everything. These two apps, and there are more than this, right? You can go on Expedia and Travel Zoo, and many apps subscribe to, the services that are, putting out tours and excursions for people. These two apps, Viator and Get Your Guide, were the two that we used. So these are really handy to have on your phone as well. Let's talk about money for just a moment. When we went, the Croatian dollar was really called the kuna. Interesting fun fact. Kuna is a word for a pine marten, which is a little furry creature that used to be trapped for its fur way back in the old ages, right? So that was the dollar. It was the kuna. Since we've been there, they have finally switched to the euro. So that makes it even easier, right? It's not yet another currency you've got to figure out, but have a currency converter app on your phone just to always kind of double check. If you're doing some shopping or something like that, just double check that, you're paying what you think you're paying. And another thing to note, and it's a mistake that so many people make, is they use these little kiosks for currency exchange, and they're very convenient, but they don't realize how much money they're losing by using them. You see them in the airport. You see them in any place that's frequented by travelers, by tourists. You'll see, currency exchange everywhere. It's everywhere. But I would suggest you do not use them. Don't use them in your home country. Don't use them in your destination country. Use ATMs. A lot of folks, for some reason, they just don't realize that the ATMs are in most cases going to give you the best rate. Now, that's not always the case. The 5 largest banks in Croatia are listed on the screen here. You should definitely use the ATMs for one of these banks. I prefer to use an ATM that is attached to an actual branch. My wife had one of her cards eaten by a machine, and she had no recourse, right? Because it was just a little kiosk embedded into a wall next to a shop, and there's no attendant there. But these are the largest banks that I'm displaying on the screen here. We use PBZ, or what they would call it PBZ. It's a major bank, very reputable. But regardless of the ATM that you're using, when you're putting your card in, putting your code in, asking, answering its questions and stuff like that, a lot of times that ATM will default to really large sums of money that it wants you to withdraw out, because the larger the money, the more they might make if you accept their conversion rate. Each one of the menu systems is different, but just remember this: if the ATM machine offers to do the currency conversion for you, say no, right? So withdraw 100, 200, 300 euros, whatever you feel like you need, and don't accept the ATM's offer of doing the currency conversion, because that currency conversion also comes with a little convenience fee for them. Let the banks, your bank and their bank, worry about the conversion, and it'll almost always end up in your favor. So that's really what I have to say about money and banking. Now, another thing, depending on how many cities you're going to be traveling, Croatia has very old, amazing, beautiful cities, and some of the old towns are very crowded. You do not want to drive a car in those places. But if you're going from city to city, you want to rent a car. It's a lovely experience. I like the roads in Croatia better than the roads in the United States. And it pains me to say that, but I was so impressed with the road system. If you're going from city to city, there are buses, but a lot of times those buses will take 12 hours to go from one city to another, where you could accomplish the same thing in 2 to 3 hours in a rented car. It was very affordable to rent a car, same deal, just, search for rental cars, right? Just different rental car companies. We ended up getting the best deal from an Avis rent-a-car. And the lovely part about it here is they drive on the same side of the road as those of us in North America. So they do use manual transmissions, which I loved. It allows you to save a little more on fuel. But, just an excellent highway system. These highway systems are paid for by tolls, right? So I think it costs us a couple hundred kuna to go from Pula all the way to Split and vice versa. And there's always a human being in the toll booth to give you change, right? It's not one of those situations where it's unattended and you don't have the right currency and, you're going to get a ticket and then the rental car company's going to charge you something after. Don't worry about that. The people are nice. The roads are nice. Just take the usual precautions when renting a car, do a video, walk around to the car, take pictures of any damage, make sure they know about that damage before you rent the car. I was very nervous about driving there when I went, and I was studying websites that listed Croatian road signs and everything. But when I got there, everything made perfect sense. Whoever designed the roads and the signs was a genius, right? Everything was very easy to understand. There's a couple of things that you need to know that I will point out, though. In Croatia, you cannot make a right-hand turn on a red light. Even if no traffic is coming, you must wait. You cannot turn right on red. As you're driving through cities, towns, Skol or Skolska, that's a school zone, right? So be careful there. Slow down a little bit. And the speed limit will also be very clearly posted. And then if you're driving the highway system, Odmorist is a rest stop. So if you're used to an American highway system, there's rest stops where you can stop and rest or, get a bite to eat or, walk your dog or whatever, right? The Odmorists in Croatia, if the symbol shows a restaurant and a hotel, it'll almost always show fuel, right? The restaurants there are amazing. We stopped at a few Odmorists in Croatia that had amazing foods, desserts, buffets, clean restrooms. Again, it was an absolute pleasure to travel by car in Croatia. I highly recommend it to you. Last tip regarding airlines. So, airlines. Interesting thing happened to us. We had booked our tickets, and I'm going to produce another video on how I find really good deals on plane tickets, so please subscribe for that. What happened to us is we had purchased our round-trip tickets to Split via Delta Airlines, and Delta Airlines would fly us to Amsterdam, and then it would be another airline that would fly us down to the Dutch carrier, Dutch KLM would fly us down to Split from Amsterdam. days before our flight took off, they canceled that flight from Amsterdam to Split, which was really, really concerning to us, obviously. But I jumped on Google Flights and I found all of the Delta partners that could potentially get us to Split. And we ended up flying to Rome instead. And then from Rome, it was really just a short hop over the Adriatic Sea on a prop plane to get to Split. And we just had to deal with a really long layover in Rome, but we got there. However, as we were going to board a Croatia Airlines flight from Rome to Split, a lot of times in international airports, they don't announce the gate you're leaving from until like maybe 20 minutes before the plane's supposed to leave. So then you got to run to get to that gate. Well, we got there, checked in at the counter. Always check in at the counter when you get there. Make sure that everything's copacetic. Well, the lady behind the counter looked at our reservation and said, "This isn't a valid ticket." And we were shocked at that because I had made the same flight changes for our travel companions and theirs were valid. So she gave us completely useless information. I ran all over the place to other counters, couldn't get any assistance. My wife, as I mentioned earlier, is a flight attendant. She went on to an app that only airline employees have access to and purchased what they call is a Z fare, meaning if there's room on the plane for you as an airline employee and you pay the taxes, you can get on the flight. So she purchased Z fares for her and I, showed those ticket numbers to the person, and she let us on the plane. But if we were not, if we did not have access to those tools, most people don't, we would have been stuck in Rome. It would have been a real tragedy. So what did I learn from this is if you are taking flights where you're going to be on multiple carriers, create an account on those multiple carriers' websites and put those confirmation numbers, put those ticket numbers in, and make sure that every airline in your journey recognizes that as a valid ticket. And if it doesn't, call back your whatever carrier you bought those tickets from and have them fix the problem. So the other issue is, just give yourself plenty of time, right? If you're one of those American fly fishers that wants to go try fishing Europe for the first time and you haven't spent a lot of time traveling internationally, well, sometimes it can be a little painful. But if you have the right attitude going into it, then, disappointment's all about expectations, right? So plan on waiting in airports. Plan on, give yourself time, give yourself a book to read, download some shows onto your phone or your tablet or something like that. And chill, just be chill, just realize that things take time and everyone's doing their best. And just smile and be nice to everybody, particularly airline employees, right? So, just kind of set your expectations low. Make sure you've confirmed every flight with every airline if it's not all the same airline. And, use the Google Flights application. It's just flights.google.com. I'll create another video on how I use that application to find new places to explore at a reasonable price. But it's also handy for looking up all airlines of a particular partnership level, right? So One World versus Advantage versus, different perks, right? Different airlines that subscribe to different partnership programs so that hopefully you could use that information to say to one airline, look, could you get me on that particular flight because you have a partnership with them? So be aware of those airline partnerships. I hope you found this information useful. So if you've stuck with me so far, thank you so much. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more travel, adventure, fly fishing related videos, please hit that subscribe button. It's been a pleasure going over all this information with you. For our next adventure, we've developed a short list, And that includes Tasmania, Spain, Ireland, a few other countries. But do me a favor, put a comment below if there's some place you're really interested in learning more about and you'd really like to see somebody go fly fishing there.